He's David Morassutti. This is CFL Talk. And if you're an Argo fan, let's start right off the hop. Big news today. What's that news, David?
Well, it looks like the head coach has earned himself a little contract extension. Something that I honestly, personally, I kind of forgot that he was in the final year of his deal, but it was actually something that was being discussed. Would they look to do an extension? They said, "Oh, come in due time." Team's off to a 3-0 start. They're looking like one of the better teams in the league. So get your head coach locked up to a multi-year deal.
We can. It's easy to basically take a plan that you used before and you've been successful, and then repeat it. By bringing it somewhere else. There was no plan for Ryan Dinwiddie in being a head coach before he came to Toronto. So, this was a first time experience for him. And he has been successful from the very beginning, from the point he landed. Um, it was, of course, during COVID, which was, an interesting thing. In my conversations with him back then was, well, what do you do when the season's canceled? He goes, well, you watch the NFL and you pretend you're a coach in that regard. So he was using the NFL to keep his coaching acumen fresh, accurate, and active. And obviously, it stood him in good stead.
Yeah, no, it did. Sometimes when you have, yeah, obviously we thought maybe that time off would have maybe not done him so well, but it turned in fact that maybe it gave him a little more time to really think about covering all of his bases, right? Sometimes coaches got thrown into the fire. Sometimes coaches, that some coaches like that, they want to get right into it. And some coaches like that ability to prepare and have that time to really break things down. And I think for Dinwiddie, it certainly helped that he had some time to get himself ready for this step that he took in, because yeah, you're right, he came into this and people kind of shook their heads, right? Like somebody who's never really had a high profile coaching job, right? He was a quarterbacks coach, and then all of a sudden he was thrown into taking over a franchise that, let's face it, the 2 years before he came aboard were in dire straits. They were, couple, back to back 4-win seasons. He had to come in and turn that around, and he certainly has. I don't think the team, right now, if they were to go out and win the East Division, if they go and win, finish first place again, it'd be the first time in franchise history that they would ever do so.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and I think the thing that I enjoy and respect the most about Ryan Dinwiddie as a person who follows the game is his ability to deal with, I don't know, unusual circumstances. He hasn't really had an instant start to the game. I talked about the pandemic and that. He's not a guy who appears to get flustered. I'm sure, and I've seen him when he's frustrated and even angry, but it doesn't show up on the sidelines. And there have been plenty of opportunities for that kind of response by the coach, and he hasn't had it. I think the greatest quality that he's demonstrated to me in my time watching him up close is he is pretty calm, and he pretty much doesn't let things go crazy. And we've seen him make some mistakes of ignorance, of not knowing what's going on, and he has not been embarrassed about it or reacted weirdly about it. He's come out and told us, yeah, I didn't realize that. That was on me. And it's refreshing. It really is, where, it seems more and more, because of the coaching carousel, the pressure on coaches when they get off on the next stop, there's more pressure on them because they've been on the carousel and people expect a lot. Ryan Dinwiddie's expectations from the fans, not so much management, because I don't know how the management felt about their expectations, but I know the fans couldn't expect that much. I know as a person covering the team, I didn't know what to expect from this new guy that's never been a head coach. He's a quarterbacks coach. I don't think he was even an offensive coordinator yet.
No, I mean he had. Here's the thing: like some people look at his past with just Calgary, but when he
Montreal.
yeah, but he was he spent time in Montreal before he did. And, he was also a player. We also have to remember that as well.
In the Canadian
I
Football
think
League.
he was the offensive quality coach in Montreal. But here's the thing too, because in Calgary, the coaching staff is kind of run, differently, right? They don't necessarily always have an offensive coordinator because they have Dave Dickinson who kind of runs the offense,
Right.
right? So I'm sure Dinwiddie had some influence on the offense there too. And actually, the one person maybe many in Toronto should thank for this hire is John Hufnagel,
Mm-hmm.
because Bill Manning went and spent some time with Hufnagel, and I'm pretty sure Hufnagel was the one that kind of put Dinwiddie's name out there as a coaching candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Toronto should be very fortunate that he
I
was
think
given
Bill
that.
told that story on our show, in fact.
Yeah.
He said it himself on our show. So, yeah. So you're being very accurate here.
So I think that's this is where I appreciate what the Argos have done, in that they didn't just go back to the coaching well that we've seen in the CFL far off too often. They went with someone different. They went with someone who brought something different. And I think the best thing on top of that is they brought in quality coaches with them. Dinwiddie really trusts his staff. Everyone's talking about Coach Corey Mace, the defensive coordinator. I was listening to the X's and O's podcast, good friends of the show, with Ben Grant, and they said, "Look, don't be surprised if Corey Mace is the next guy, right? That gets
Ryan Dinwiddie has said that himself as well during
right."
our interviews. Yeah.
It helps. Dinwiddie's a good head coach, but he's also put a really good staff in around him.
And the idiosyncratic situation here is with Pinball Clemens, who clearly has a good handle on the kind of character, the kind of thoughtfulness, the kind of person that could make a great head coach. This organization, the Toronto Argonauts, have not operated, and I say this with total sincerity here. They have operated outside the coaching and assistant coaching carousel. They if there's a theme to this organization, it is, let's try something different. Let's try somebody new. Who looks like they could fit into this position, even though they've never had this position? Let's look at a fresh outlook. And it's been a very successful plan, and it's a dangerous plan. You're hiring people to do some. Mace was not a defensive coordinator. That's not to suggest that he shouldn't be, because obviously he should be. He's a great defensive coordinator. But the point is, with the Argos under Pinball Clemens, they take a lot of new people in who haven't done the specific task that they're being asked to do. And I find that interesting and really counterintuitive to what we believe and think, the way coaching and even general managers, the way it works in the Canadian Football League. It's totally it's not what you expect in the hiring process.
Yeah, no, it's not, and it just goes to show, maybe a little bit of a difference in how that approach is now could change with other organizations, right? Other organizations like to steal what other teams have done because, simply put, they need to find a way to, improve, right? Like you look at Edmonton, you think Edmonton maybe wants to reconsider how they're doing their situation potentially. You look at Ottawa. I mean, Ottawa seems to maybe. Well, I mean, their situation is a little bit different than Edmonton, but I think there's teams right now that you look at it and say, maybe we're doing it wrong. Maybe the old way of doing it is not the right way. It's not always going to work that way. It's not a good thing you can always copycat and hope it'll work out. But in some cases, some teams have kind of gone with the old and getting the same result.
The competition for coaches is very intense, and especially when the coaches that they're going after are ones with experience. Um, so yeah, if you can find a new coach, great. If you can find a new GM, even better. But the thing is with the Argos and what they've done, it also goes down to the players. It goes down to the quarterback. The Argonauts have not, they've traded for number one quarterbacks, Zach Caleros being one, and then they sent him off to Winnipeg. McLeod Bethel Thompson is a quarterback that learned since 2017 in Toronto under Ricky Ray, and he became, he rose to the number one quarterback. We talked many times about the players the quarterbacks that have been brought in, like Arbuckle, Franklin, who were to be, the number one quarterbacks. It seems to be a theme with this organization. They really are. It seems, they're a meritocracy. If you deserve your shot, don't worry. We're not stuck because we made a decision. If that decision isn't fruitful or doesn't yield what we intended or hoped it would yield, we'll move on to the next person, player, or coach that shows that they deserve to carry the ball, literally or figuratively, however you want to put it.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, they've also held on to guys for that reason. They think if a good player is going to be good enough to help this team, they're going to keep that player around, even if they're going through injuries or there's some struggles there. They're going to find a way to make them better. Teams are very hasty to just let a player go. They sign with another team, and then you're just like, oh, I can't believe this guy was made available. Like this team gave up on him. That's something that also happens far too often in the CFL, and players remember that. Players will say, you know what, like this team gave me that chance when others were looking to get rid of me because I did, maybe I just wasn't playing up to their standards right away. And that's something that they definitely remember. You hear some players talk about that, and they're very appreciative of that.
And that word's really important in the Argo organization. The players, the coaches, everyone say the same thing. I appreciate you. And I
Yeah.
think that's important. I think that's important. And if they're walking the talk, that's a clear advantage in team building, right? That's important. And in case people think, well, listen, they're talking about the Argos, blah blah blah. Well, here's the thing: I spend more time privately talking to Argos in the Argo organization, so I'm going to assume, and I'm going to only assume this just for the sake of positive discussion, that every other team and every other coaching staff feels the same way. I just don't know they don't, is what I'm trying to say. That's all.
Well, and you also have a statement that you wanted to read as well about Dinwiddie as well.
Yeah, okay, I can. I got to find my phone. So we exchanged texts. I texted him. I sent him a text congratulating him, and he responded within literally seconds, actually. Um, and I blame that on David, who's a very good partner and a very good person to be associated with when it comes to the Argos, and we try as hard as we can to be um, professional in what we do. We might have fun doing what we're doing. I might have fun doing what I'm doing, but we try to be professional. And so he answered, and I said, "Congrats on the contract. Do you have a quote?" He goes, "Excited to continue as the head coach of the Argos and continue to build this place into a consistent winner for our fans to be proud of. My family enjoys the city. I have built relationships outside of football to make it our year-round home." So Southern Ontario, Toronto is a place where he wants to live. And obviously, he has a young family as well. We forget that even though he's a head coach, he has a young family as well. And it's hard to transplant yourself your wife, your children, and when, for work. It's easy to be a head coach. It's easy. I shouldn't say that. It's easier to be a head coach. It's easier to do coaching than it is to ensure that your family is in a good place and happy to be where they are, because those are two opposites, or two things on, they could be two trains on two tracks under the same train. But the point is, it's there really has to be a symbiosis between your job and your personal life. And for a guy to decide to stay here all year round, which, by the way, was one of the conditions Pinball Clemens laid out for the head coach and for anyone that works for the Argos on a management side, they expect you to be in Toronto all year round. In other words, you're committing to this community, and I think that's a large advantage as well in thinking, and that's Pinball Clemens applying the family community plan that he has.
I think the big thing for to talk about your point about the family, it's not just the head coach you have to sell the plan on; it's also the family too, because Dinwiddie puts in a lot of work. Whether it's, his preparation doesn't end when he leaves the stadium; it also continues probably when he gets home. So there is that toll it does take on the family life, and fortunately he feels like his wife has done, has supported him as much as possible, and it's not easy. The Argos just went through a situation where, McLeod Bethel Thompson decided I needed to stay closer to my home so that my wife can also pursue her, her dreams. It was hard for him to be away, and that led to him leaving. Although, if you haven't seen, McLeod Bethel Thompson was released from his USFL team, meaning there might be some news involving McLeod Bethel Thompson. I don't know if there's going to be CFL news, but there might be some news. So wherever he's going next, I'm sure his partner is going to be, the first person to sign off. That's something that's first and foremost most important for a lot of these guys.
How
They're
are the
not
Saints at quarterback?
right. Right. So it's this game takes a lot, especially for those who are very invested in being as good as they can be.
Well, my first assumption was, I was just curious as to whether he would go to Ottawa, and how it, and the qualifier that I laid out there was, how does it impact on his future plans? And his future plans are, and as they have been since the moment that he came to the Canadian Football League, it was always going to be, from his perspective and his thinking, a stepping stone to the NFL. There's never been any doubt that that's his intention. Now, the question is, does he feel, do we know that was that release something that he asked for?
I'm
Is
sure
it
it
something,
was.
right? And now you and I are wondering, because of what you just said, or you were wondering before, but I'm wondering now, was that a request because there's something that could happen in the NFL, or does he see a job back in the Canadian Football League as something not such a bad idea after all? Is he thinking, if he's isn't hearing from the NFL the way he hopes, does he throw his support to being a CFLer again?
Well, and that's the thing. We're not too sure. Dan Ralph actually reported that McLeod Bethel Thompson is still keeping the NFL dream open. I know some people are saying, well, you have to give up at some point. But, the NFL is doing a new thing this year, and Dan Ralph actually brought this up. He said that that with NFL teams allowed to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, one of them not being actually, like, you don't have to waste a active roster spot on that third quarterback. More teams are going to look to bring in these veteran guys rather than use that on a rookie, because
Guys like McLeod Bethel Thompson.
guys like McLeod Bethel Thompson who have experience, because if you look at the San Francisco 49ers, they lost
Here
first
we go.
quarterbacks. They had to go with the guy who never play quarterback, or potentially they were in a position where they might have had to go and throw in their injured quarterback into a game. They didn't want to do that. It looks bad on the NFL. So for McLeod Bethel Thompson, someone like him, he sees that as an opportunity to get himself back into the NFL. And that's a dream for a lot of players. I never begrudge
Ah.
a player for wanting to pursue that opportunity if that opportunity is out there. And
Imagine, David, imagine if he was available on the sideline to go in instead of a guy with no quarterback, no professional quarterback experience, if I frame it right.
right. And so I think for him, it's a tough one because he's got to know for sure that he has, like, for the CFL, that's a guaranteed spot almost for him. The NFL
Right.
is not guaranteed. If feels he has a shot at the NFL, I'm sorry, you got to go and take that shot, even if that means giving up on the CFL. I know the Ottawa Redblacks also signed a quarterback today. He was actually with Winnipeg in training camp. Looked pretty
Mhm.
good preseason, but didn't make it through. Tyrell Pigram.
Mhm.
So actually, they signed two, Jake Dunaway as well. So I think Dustin Crum will start against the Blue Bombers. But yeah, I mean, if you're McLeod Bethel Thompson, that's a team right there that will take him.
That's the guy in the team that I think are a good. Now, here's a question for you. The Argos have his rights, do they? Not?
What's that? Sorry?
Do the Argos have his rights?
No.
So he's a free agent when he
He
comes
was a
back.
free agent. Yeah, he was a free agent at the end of. Yeah, he was a pending free agent. So the Argos didn't have his rights.
So basically, he said he wouldn't come back unless it was with the Argos. So
That's what he initially said. He was
right,
going to come
so
back
that
to
could
the
change.
CFL unless it was with Toronto. That changes though, because the Argos have moved on.
Right.
So I think for him, I mean, there's not. I think what's more important to go back to? Like, is it more important to stay loyal to Toronto, or you got an opportunity potentially to start games in Ottawa?
There's a lot of questions. We've reviewed a couple. The question is, does he want to stay in Toronto? Does he want to play in the Canadian Football League first
Right.
and foremost? Is it in Toronto or is he willing to play anywhere? Is he looking to maybe on his resume, it would look pretty good, wouldn't it, if he signed with Ottawa and took that team to the playoffs and let's say won the Eastern Division?
Winning the East might be a little bit of a stretch, but just to
No,
get them
no,
to the
I
playoffs,
what I'm saying is
yeah.
resume building. I'm talking about resume building.
I think if he turns that team season around, and even if he gets them close, I think that helps his case for
I
sure.
guess right now the playoffs would be a plum.
Yeah, for Ottawa for sure. I would assume that fan base is striving for the playoffs. That's always been their goal. That's always been what they wanted. So for him to go in and do that would be that would definitely, I think, improve his. I mean, he's got a pretty good reputation after what he did with Toronto. But I
Absolutely.
think in a lot of ways it might actually help in terms of maybe helping his reputation just that little bit more.
Just a little more resume building. And doing it with a team that doesn't have that much hope, I think it's a great opportunity for him to prove how good a quarterback he is. I don't know this. I'll be honest. I don't know the situation in the league that he was in the USFL. I don't know the kind of coaches they had. I don't know what kind of team it was. What I do know is statistically, he replicated what he did here in Toronto. My point being that if he could replicate what he did in Toronto, in Ottawa, with a team that doesn't do that kind of stuff, don't have an offense, and he comes and all of a sudden they have an offense again. That's the resume building that I'm talking about, that he could show how important he is in making it happen, as opposed to being in a good situation with a good coach, with a good game plan, a great offensive line, and away you go.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice to see if he can do it in a different situation for sure. Like, we talk of how many the best CFL quarterbacks. Whenever you go through lists, a a lot of them have played for multiple organizations to kind of show that, it wasn't just the one team or wasn't the one situation that kind of got them over the top. I look at Tom Brady. Everybody talks about Tom Brady being the greatest quarterback of all time. And what solidified it for Tom Brady? He goes to a new team, first year on a new team, championship.
Yep.
Right? That
Now
solidified.
that team was ready to win. I mean,
It was a team ready to win, but it was a
was
team
ready to win, but they didn't. They hadn't yet.
they hadn't yet. They needed the quarterback. They got the best quarterback they could, and look what happened. He it wasn't easy, but that's what it does when you have that ability to just get that team over the hump.
And as far as being the greatest of all time, I think McLeod Bethel Thompson has the ability and the opportunity to show how great a quarterback he is in the Canadian Football League. He can solidify. I mean, I don't know. Is he Hall of Fame material in the Canadian Football League in your mind? I think he is. If he comes back and does something with Ottawa, I think he guarantees it.
Yeah, I don't think one season would do it for me, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have to be more than one. He'd have to go and do it again with another team for me to give that status, in my opinion. Like there are players who did it.
He's had multiple years. He's had 4 years where he has statistically been one of the best in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, but it didn't really. Here's the thing: is that enough to, or is there? Do you have to see the?
I don't know. That's why I asked the question. I didn't have an answer, and I don't mean to argue with you. That's not my intent. It was just a question, and I just think that's why I'm saying that if he went to Ottawa, and let's say the NFL didn't come calling or didn't send an invitation, it could be they've sent the invitation. I mean, if you're San Francisco and there's a guy like McLeod Bethel Thompson out there, you're calling him. Now, the question is living near where his wife works as important as getting that NFL break? That's, he was in the CFL, been there, done that, and now he's giving his wife the kind of attention, in his own words, as he's spoken, that he wanted to be near and give her a chance to take the lead, right? But if an NFL opportunity came, that's a new kettle of fish. That's something new. That would be something new. I don't know that she wouldn't understand, or he wouldn't have that already discussed with her, that if there's a move to the NFL, he would do his best to do it near home as much as he could, I would assume, based on the information that we have today, up until today. I can't see him turning down an NFL job, David.
No, I don't see him turning down an NFL job. You would like that I think is the biggest that's one where you look at even Nathan Rourke. Some people said he could have made more in the CFL. It wasn't about just money. It's the opportunity to.
It's the ceiling.
Money, but then make more money.
It's the ceiling, a much higher ceiling in the NFL.
Let's be honest. I always bring it back to hockey. Hockey players aren't just happy to be happy with playing professional hockey. The NHL is the standard. That's the standard, right?
Absolutely.
So they do what they can to get to that level, to get to that place. They'll never deny themselves an opportunity for that, right?
There is a comparison, David. There is a comparison, right? And the comparison is that if you're a hockey player, playing in the National Hockey League is awesome, but playing on the team of your country in the Olympics is something that you can't blame a player for wanting to do that, right? It's a little extra, right? It's a bit, there's a bit more jam in that. There's the ceiling, the excitement level is much higher for something like that as a player, to being on the best team in the world and representing your country. So players, there's lots of ways to be satisfied, and staying in one place doesn't necessarily continue to fill the void that is your excitement and or your dreams, and what we're talking about here, when you talk about the NFL and when you talk about even a Canadian quarterback, the dream is to play in the best league in the world, to play at the highest level possible. And anyone who wants to argue with me about the NFL being a higher level than the Canadian Football League is going to get an argument from me. But what I will say is that doesn't diminish the importance of the Canadian Football League. It's,
Oh,
you're comparing apples and oranges. It's just
exactly.
that simple.
Yeah, we're not saying the CFL like it's obvious that the best talent is always played in the NFL, right? The product is I understand the game might not be
Right,
as
we're not talking about the product. We're talking singularly from the player's perspective,
no.
financially and emotionally.
Yeah, every player would if you gave every player the chance to choose between the CFL or the NFL, majority of them are taking the NFL. Like I would say 90%, in my opinion, 90% would do that. Would take that opportunity to go to the NFL. And I might even be lowballing it at going at 90%. It's just
Absolutely.
what it's where it's the pinnacle of the game. The big lights, Sunday night football, Monday night football. There's
Howard Cosell.
exactly right. Like that's just it's where it's built itself as the top brand of football in the world. It's put in the
Absolutely.
investment and it's made players have put in a lot of effort to get that opportunity for to play in the NFL.
So congratulations to Ryan Dinwiddie for his new contract, multi-year contract, well earned. He has done a marvelous job with the Toronto Argonauts. The Grey Cup speaks to a lot of success, as does winning the championship, the Eastern Division, not making it past Hamilton in that first season, but still being in first place, and then continuing, and then winning the Grey Cup, and then coming to the third year that he's here. He's atop the league, and he leads a team that's the only team in the league undefeated. Yes, they played a couple of games less than a couple of teams, but still, they're undefeated. Let's talk a little bit about the games that took place. And, I get a kick out of watching all the games. I know you do too. The Edmonton Saskatchewan game, I felt that this was an interesting week, which really spoke to um, teams that needed to win. All of them needed to win for different reasons against the
Yeah.
different teams that they played. With Edmonton and Saskatchewan, you have Saskatchewan, who's nicely in a position in the playoffs early in the season. Edmonton, who needed a chance and hopefully would have a chance to maybe narrow the gap between them and Saskatchewan in a playoff spot. And also finally, get on track. And this game was the weirdest game I've seen in a while. I don't know how you feel about it, but it ended 12-11. I've seen hockey games at 12-11. And this game was, I don't know, it had everything. It just didn't have a lot of points.
Yeah, I mean it was that typical two teams that have kind of struggled out of the gate and it's my classic which team wants to win it cuz it looked like none of them wanted to win it.
Really.
Like Edmonton you so many fundamental mistakes, not being able to convert a field goal, not knowing the rule about the rouge, like just
Oh,
finding ways to lose. And I, if you're in Edmonton, like that might be the last straw for some of these Edmonton fans. I wouldn't blame if it was the last straw for some of these Edmonton fans because for once the quarterback played better, not great, not perfect, played better, and it still wasn't enough. It was because other parts of the team weren't living up, weren't playing as well. They weren't. And now I'll say this: Saskatchewan, that effort was a little concerning. There were some issues there, especially Trevor Harris, some very un Trevor Harris like play in that game. Am I worried about Trevor Harris? Not really. I think it was kind of 1 week. He'll kind of rebound, and we know Trevor will find a way to get better. But this was an opportunity for Edmonton to maybe show that they can go in the right direction. And in my opinion, they took another step back. And it's
I
a
can't
time where they're
argue.
trying to take steps forward.
When you're Edmonton and Stephen Dunbar, 3 receptions for 49 yards, and that's it. That's your offense. It speaks to a problem. The rushing game wasn't bad, 65 yards for Brown. Their offensive line was doing a much better job this week than it did in the past weeks. And I agree with you. It's so easy to draw a conclusion, which I think is accurate. With what happened, the only way that's the player's fault, all right, is that if someone told him, whatever you do, get out of the end zone. Just get out of the end zone. Don't end up in the end zone. That's the only way it's the player's fault. If he did that knowing that, I fear and believe that he didn't know what he was doing, and nobody bothered to tell him to make sure he understood you can't give up. You'll give up a point if you don't get it out of the end zone. And here we go. This is I don't know if it was up to, like, obviously the special teams coach should have told him that. If I were to specifically discuss who's responsible for him not knowing, it's his coach, the coach directly with him. And I think Chris Jones was having a conversation with him that really was useless, because it wasn't on Chris Jones and it wasn't on the player, I don't think. And like I said, the only way it was on the player is if someone said to him and he ignored the instruction.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we've seen that before too. This isn't the first
Absolutely.
time we've seen that.
And we saw it this year. We saw it already again this year. Yeah.
So I think it is coaching. Coaches have to get those little details right. You got to tell them. Players have to tell. I mean, players have to communicate that a little bit too.
The game was on the line. The game was on the line,
They
David.
were getting ready to go. They were getting ready to go to overtime. They were thinking overtime, and they weren't thinking. And that's the problem.
Crazy stuff. Very crazy. That was
It's
crazy.
unbelievable that a team that's had so many issues. You would think that they would want to lock down those fundamentals, making sure that you're not beating yourself. And that's a game where you beat yourself. And that's a problem for Edmonton right there. They're a team that has been beaten because they're just not good enough. But then to lose a game that you could have won because you make mistakes to allow the other team to win, it's unacceptable. That's inexcusable. And that's the type of a game there where if I'm people making calls, making the decisions for Edmonton, I'm chalking it up in a reason why this direction is not the right direction.
Yeah, and a couple of statistics, if I can throw a couple out there for the viewers that belie the way that game was played. Edmonton had 21 first downs to Saskatchewan's 16. And I find that, they gave up a lot of penalties. Time of possession was 37 minutes for Edmonton, 22, almost 23 for Saskatchewan. This is the issue with teams that are good and teams that are bad. You figure out how to win in this case. And I'm telling you, if we look in the dictionary under knowing how to lose is in the dictionary, Edmonton's pitcher is going to be there, because this game highlighted how they've lost and how their ineptitude is costly. And, we're not talking here about game plans. We're talking about things that just should not happen. What I will say to the Elk fans and to people out there, Ryan Dinwiddie will be the first to admit that he's had some brain cramps. and look where he is right now. So it's more than possible for Edmonton to turn things around, but you got to eliminate those brain cramps and those things that turn a game around instantly. And nothing turns a game around more than giving up a rouge at the end of the game when you're tied with your opponent.
Yeah, no, and that's the issue there. It's those types of things that you just don't know if the team is going to be able to come back from it. Like
I
that's
think they can. I think they can.
I think right now the important thing for Chris Jones is he's got to manage the locker room right now, because there's going to be some very frustrated players that are going to say, "I've had enough of this," and he's got to get them to buy in to what he's trying to do.
Confidence, the belief system in the organization, and by the organization, I mean what goes on that affects the locker room directly. There's a lot of corrections that have to be made, and I think they can be made. Um, I I believe that Chris Jones knows how to win. Is the reason we talked about this last week. I'm just wondering whether, I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between the Jones Elks of this time and the Chris Jones Elks of last time. And the only thing I can come up with is 1-year contracts. I'm just wondering more and more, does he have the power to ensure that the players know that it's him or the highway, right? But you know, if they start losing faith in him, David, they don't have to support him, and they go, well, he'll be gone. Well, this will make sure he's gone. I can't wait to talk, to deal with another coach. He's basically hung out to dry, and Jones needs the confidence of the people who've hired him, because he does do things in a very systematic way, and he has high expectations, and I think it's fair to say, very demanding. How do
Oh
you
yeah.
be demanding on a 1-year contract?
Well, that's the big problem right there, right? This is where the people at the top making the decisions have to come down and say, "This is our guy. It's his way or the highway." If they truly believe that he is the one, they're going to have to be the one to say it's his way or the highway. Like that's the way it goes. And then you can start sending a message if there's players that are not buying in. Who's the first one we're going to trade? Right?
Yeah, I
Who do
mean,
you want us to trade to send that message clear?
I don't know. I don't know. He ordained his quarterback. Taylor Cornelius is Chris Jones' guy. He signed him, so they can't trade him, because that ends up coming back on Chris Jones, and also I think the decision to not start him in the previous game, I think, hindsight being what it is, right, was a mistake. Knowing hindsight, like, I mean, I wouldn't have not started him the next time out. I just think that he's a young quarterback, who right now, the scariest part for him is he doesn't have accuracy, short throwing accuracy. He's not very confident, and they got to build up his confidence. We've seen this with quarterbacks over the years, and we'll continue to see quarterbacks get on the slippery slope of lack of confidence, and it's hard to get back up that hill.
Oh, it's certainly hard. And again, but that's on Chris Jones to get him back on track in that regard. I do think that when you look at the um the situation in Edmonton, you look at Ottawa, kind of following, they had kind of a similar issue there. You got to get players to have some sort of belief in what they want to accomplish. Once they get that belief established, then things start to go in the right direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Then we have the Argo game. They'll be playing the Alouettes, which will be really interesting. But before I go there, Let's talk about Calgary and Winnipeg. Um, Winnipeg 24, Calgary 11 at home. They lost their last home game. They were embarrassed. Needless to say, they were angry. I'm speaking about Winnipeg. And Calgary does not look like they have an offense. Their defense looks okay, but the mayor of Calville is not delivering. 122 yards on 14 of 25 does not do it for an offense.
No, that offense is struggling, and they might be like they're fortunate Edmonton has been as bad as they have been, because I would put Calgary in the lower echelon of the CFL's offense right now. They're just not finding a way to get production through the air. They're still a really good running team, but we know in the CFL that only gets you so far. If you are not able to pass the ball, you're limiting what your offense can do, and that's a very perplexing for me because of who's in charge there.
Absolutely.
Does not seem like, yeah, this is not something I'd expect from a Dave Dickinson offense right now. And
Absolutely.
he's the chief. He's the guy that's got to get this back on track.
Yeah, and it's all about offense, and he's the guy that makes the calls. On Saturday, Ottawa was in Hamilton. This is a game. Sadly, we watched Mazzoli get hurt in the first quarter. A real sad situation, and these injuries, non-contact injuries, they seem to be worse than contact injuries, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen the Achilles tendon injury. It took out a great quarterback in BC, right? And we know from that experience that it's not an injury that you can play with. It's one that you know you got to go through the process, and it's going to require surgery, and then it's going to have to have recovery time. And he's gone for the year again. I mean, does Ottawa move on now from Mazzoli because he can't stay healthy? Football's a business. What have you done for me lately is a common phrase that football players will hear, not just from fans, but from management as well.
Yeah, in my opinion, when it comes to Mazzoli, yeah, they've put faith in him. My issue has not been putting faith in him. My issue is they haven't put faith in developing someone behind him. They've had time to figure. They've seen that they need another guy, and then it's just like now they have to go out and look for somebody else. What do
Well, as
you
long as
mean?
you don't need that second guy, it's not a problem. Look at the Argos. I mean, if Chad Kelly goes down, what
Yeah,
happens then?
they're in trouble if Chad Kelly goes down. But here's the thing: Chad Kelly doesn't have that cloud
History.
of history where you say, an injury is just around the corner for him. That's not the thing.
Yeah, it's not a thing
That's
for
not
him
the
yet.
thing with Chad Kelly. It is for Mazzoli, and it's so unfortunate. Like I just couldn't believe it for him, and it angers me that we lose a year of him for an injury that it wasn't his fault. Like you look at last year, that injury is not his fault. It's not even the knee that he hurt last time. It's a totally different situation. And this time around, yes, it's an injury that it's injury to a leg he's injured before, but it's a different type of injury. Like he just cannot catch a break.
Yeah, yeah. This is one of those situations where one might wonder if this is where we talk about athletes over stimulation in as far as preparation and or doing your off road work or off field work. We live in an era where players have begun to realize that stretching is a priority, not building up muscle and whatever.
Yeah, it's not about building muscle. It's about having muscle that's
Not too tense.
well, it's having that durability. It's durability. right? It's one thing to have big muscles, but it's another to have your muscles be durable. I mean, I guarantee we could have AJ Willett on here and he can tell us the difference
Hmm.
between having muscle and having, the ability to keep yourself healthy because your muscles are able to sustain the workload that you put on it and the
Yep.
hits that come with it.
So I have to say, Hamilton looked good defensively. Guys like Simone Lawrence proved that why they're stars in this league. The one thing Hamilton needs to be successful are the big people on the team, the stars of the show. Be the stars of the show. Simone Lawrence was just that in that game. When he's not invisible, this team can be really interesting. Sadly, with Ottawa, after that injury, it's like they couldn't. It was the team that could not run straight or shoot straight. They could not run straight. They looked terrible. It was such a disorganized mess that I think was because of the emotions of their quarterback going down. It's been a while that they've been waiting for him to come back. I mean, I myself have talked about how Ottawa will be a much better team when Mazzoli's under center, and he's there for a quarter. That's got to be frustrating for the team. It was a tough game for that team. They need to reset. Hopefully, they will, and they'll come out and play a little better in their next game. With I don't think the mistakes that they made against Hamilton are ones that are pervasive and or will repeat themselves. I think they can go back to being the great defensive team that they were, and also at least have a modest offense if they can get a quarterback that can do some stuff. It's not easy in the Canadian Football League to break in new quarterbacks. It's just very hard.
Especially at this point of the year, because you're bringing in guys who haven't played the system before. But they did bring in one guy who has been in a CFL system. They have someone who has been in their system already. I'm just wondering, is it too little, too late? I mean, there's still time. It's an 18 game season. Hamilton hasn't been great.
They've had four quarterbacks in the last two games, David. Three of them are hurt.
Well, I mean but that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
They,
You just gotta hope the next guy can figure it out.
let's talk about so they lose Ottawa loses 21-13, and then we have Montreal losing to BC 35-19. BC was at home. They were feeling vengeful. This is the team that I think you and I and everybody else who considers themselves a CFL expert felt that this team was ready to take over from Winnipeg, and then they showed us that they were ready to take over from Winnipeg. And then they came into Toronto and they needed to undo some stuff. They mistakes that they made, that Adams made. He didn't make them against Montreal, and he looked more like the guy that we expect to see. So Vernon Adams looked good, had a TD, no interceptions, which is a lot less than 6. So BC looked really good, and Cody Fajardo, he looks good too in Montreal. It's just I don't think it's fair to judge him in this game against BC. BC is they're top 3 in the league easily.
Yeah,
we all know that.
for me though, yeah, it's hard, but that's a game for Montreal where that's a game where you can show how good you are. And unfortunately, it didn't go their way. I mean, the big problem here for Montreal, if you want to know what's Montreal's problem, how about the fact that your quarterback got sacked 7 times? 7. Matthew Betts, he's putting himself in that defensive player of the year category with the way that he's played to start the year. But Montreal, you cannot win if you cannot protect your quarterback. And I think 2 problems there, in my opinion. One being they're not getting anything out of the running game. Like William Stanback had 6 carries for 17 yards. Excuse me? He was supposed to be the best running back in the Canadian Football League, and he's looked anything but that. Austin Mack, he's looked like a stud receiver for Montreal. Very good. They've got some weapons there. That's something I didn't expect. But Cody Fajardo's running for his life, just like he was in Saskatchewan. And the running game is That would be the best way to protect your quarterback is if you can get a running game going. So you're not asking him to throw 40 times a game. Sorry, Cody Fajardo should not be throwing 40 times a game. I'm sorry. It's
Argument.
not his. That's not going to lead to success for him. And until they figure that part out, they're going to struggle to really push forward as an offense.
I hate to sound like such a positive guy, but I think they can work it out. At the end of the day, what they want to do is they want the process of becoming a better and better team. They can do that, and they can do it and make the playoffs. And at the end of the day, this is all that matters in the Canadian Football League. Make the playoffs, and if you can finish first and have to win one game to get to the Grey Cup, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's time. They're clearly the second best team in the East, still, in my opinion. Hamilton, if they get it going, though, if I'm Montreal, I'm going to say we had a chance here to keep Edmonton down. I mean, to keep Hamilton down,
Yep.
and we didn't do it. They don't have the luxury, in my opinion, to see if they can get it together. They have to figure that out sooner or later.
They absolutely do. I'm going to make that the final word and leave it with you. David, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Frank.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. Thank you for watching CFL Talk, and you can check us out on Candid Frank Stanishi, the YouTube channel, and watch some of the stuff that we do. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.